Hello, and thank you for tuning into the Adventurous Podcast. I am your host, Corey McArdle. On today's episode, I wanted to adventure into the topic of environmental issues, particularly sustainability. We are joined today by Igor and Emma Brown of Bootstrap Compost, which is located in Malden, Massachusetts. We discussed the importance of composting on the environment, sustainable life practices that anyone can adopt and should adopt, and what they are doing in their community to spread environmental awareness. Igor is Bootstrap's co-founder and also a freelance filmmaker. We talked a bit about this as well, as it is interesting hearing his perspective on agriculture. Emma is the director of operations and the creator of the Somerville Hat Company, where she makes these really cool hats from recycled materials. Check her out. Bootstrap Compost were named finalists in the 2012 Mass Challenge, the 2017 Greenovate Boston, and were the Improper Bostonians' Best of Boston Green Team in 2017. Feel free to look them up at bootstrapcompost.com, especially if you're interested in some of their great services. It was a great discussion, and please forgive me for the fan noise in the first couple minutes. It was very hot in the studio, but a mental note was made going forward to eliminate this. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Bootstrap Compost.
Hi guys, we got Igor,
Hello.
Emma
Hello.
from Bootstrap Compost. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So we scheduled for 4, but you had to come late. 4.
Well, Russia was just playing in the World Cup in the quarterfinals against Croatia, and it happened to go into overtime and then penalty kicks. It was an awesome, exciting, dramatic game. Unfortunately, Russia did lose on penalty kicks, and Croatia went through, but congrats to Croatia. And
Woo!
yeah, that's why I'm here a little bit late today, and my voice is a little hoarse.
Partying.
Yep, Saturday.
all right.
You know it.
I've never been able to get into soccer. I played soccer as a kid, and I killed it. But I don't know. I can't as an adult. Explain to me, what is it about soccer? You a big fan?
I'm a huge fan. I mean, I grew up in Germany as well as Russia, but Germany for my childhood. And that's all we did. We'd go outside with a ball and just kick it around and have fun. And that's how I learned to love the game. Watched it a lot. I watch a lot of sports, so I'm just a big sports head or whatever. What is it about soccer? I mean, to me, I think it's kind of like the unpredictability of it, the fluidity of it, the fact that you can have a match where Brazil plays, England, and it's the most boring match in the world, and you just want to fall asleep. And then you have maybe Russia play Croatia, and it's like this incredible, exhilarating display of back and forth. You never know what you're going to get with soccer. I mean, I think that's the case with all sports, but especially with soccer, there's a lot of momentum, a lot of loss and win, a lot of like life lessons, and it's the world's biggest sport. So I feel like especially around the World Cup, you can see just all the jerseys out in the street, even in Boston, even now when the United States isn't participating in the actual World Cup, there's so much fever around it still because it's just something that's unifying for a lot of people. Emma, what are your takes about soccer?
I mean, you pretty much covered it. I don't know. I also grew up playing soccer in a small town, New Hampshire, and I love it, but I'm not a big, watching sports on TV kind of dude, so it's...
So you don't follow soccer today?
I don't really follow it.
What do you
today.
follow? Any sports at all?
I follow the Cleveland Indians on Twitter because their social media people are really funny. So, because of that, I end up following Cleveland. A lot of my family's also from Cleveland, so there's a little bit of hometown love there. But
all right, I don't know. For me, I'm not an aggressive dude. I'm a lover, not a fighter. But there's something about football and hockey, just annihilating people. It's so much fun. And then I don't know if this is representative of the whole population of soccer players, but I see a lot of them taking the dives. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is that part of the whole thing with soccer?
Absolutely.
You try to get the call. It's kind of a strategy thing. It's not nice or fun, and I don't enjoy it as a fan, but I get it. You know, when you're in the penalty box and you accidentally, the ball kind of bounces off your foot, and you could pretend like you fall down and maybe get a penalty for your team, you might take that chance. Some teams do it more than others. Some players do it more than others.
Also with Cleveland Indians, right? Social media, is that what you're into?
Yeah.
They're funny?
They're really funny.
Okay. So I had something because I brought you guys on to talk about your company, Bootstrap Compost, Boston's food scrap go-getters, right? Whose idea was it? I love your social media stuff with the buckets with random people. Whose idea was that? I love it.
Thank you. That was originally my idea. A few years ago, I was watching a TV show called Broad City, and they had a scene where there was one of the characters was babysitting this young kid, and she says to him like, "Don't forget your 4 R's," and he goes, "Reduce, reuse, recycle, Rihanna." And it just like was so funny to me. And that kind of was like sparked this like really strange idea of like putting a bootstrap bucket into a picture with Rihanna. And then I pitched it to Andy and Igor, and thankfully they were like I thought that they were gonna like laugh me out of the room and fire me immediately. Like I had not been working at Bootstrap for very long when this idea came along, and they were kind of like, yeah, do it. And then from there it turned into this like ongoing thing where so many people come up to me and Igor and Andy, and they say like, "Oh, I love this thing that you do. It's like so bizarre and so funny."
I really like the one with the notebook when they're on the boat
on the canoe,
with the
yeah.
bootstrap. It's great.
You know, and thankfully too, like Andy and Igor always have good ideas, and when they don't, like, you know, other people on staff do, and everybody's kind of like on board
You all
with it.
contribute.
Yeah, we all
to it.
contribute, and then I just go home and make the picture, sometimes on my phone, usually on my computer, and it mostly works out.
It started as sort of kind of a gag, I think, very early on in our Instagram presence, but now it's actually its own kind of brand and its own franchise, and we actually think very hard about it these days. We want to include people who are educators, we want to include people who are difference makers, but we also want to have fun and continue to include celebrities and musicians and all that. So thanks to Emma, we were able to go that route.
So you are the co-founder of Bootstrap.
That's me.
How did Bootstrap become Bootstrap? Or how did you get involved?
Well, that's two separate questions.
Okay. Let's answer the first one. How did Bootstrap start?
Bootstrap started, Andy was out of work, and he was Andy, my business partner, Andy Brooks, was out of work, and he was just kind of brainstorming a few company ideas. I think at that point he tried to do like a dog walking, dog sitting thing. He had a few different things going on, and then he took a trip to Vermont, and he was kind of just bummed out, and he didn't really want to. His story is that he was a journalist. He worked at the Harvard Gazette, and he quit to try to kind of do his own thing right when the economy collapsed. So it wasn't a good time to really start a new business. But he did go to Vermont, and he found about a company that was doing residential and commercial pickups out there. And he just thought, why don't I bring that idea back to Boston and try and see if it holds up. I found out about it maybe 3 months into its existence in March 2011. So it was founded in January. In March, I heard about it, and I signed up for it. At that point, I was also kind of going through my own employment woes. I was in a grad school program studying neuroscience for a PhD, and I dropped out because I wanted my life to take a direction toward working, for the protection and preservation of the environment. And so I saw Bootstrap, and I thought, you know what, this is a really cool idea. And I was sort of transitioning into a media communications sort of career. It's a long story, but ultimately I ended up making a video about Bootstrap and making a video about Andy. And at that point, Andy had about 80, 100 clients. And a few months later, he wanted me to come on and help him out as like admin help and marketing help. And at that point, I was, pretty connected with a lot of the, wheelers and dealers of the like green movement in Boston. So I was able to get us into some events, some farmers markets, kind of pitch the idea to some companies, pick up a few accounts, and just worked my butt off. He paid me, I think, for 5 hours a week, and I would work like 20 hours a week and not charge him. I didn't care.
15 hours free, pretty much.
Basically, I mean, I had a full-time job at that point at City Year as well. So City Year hired me as a communications coordinator. And then in my spare time, I would do whatever I could for Bootstrap. And then when I officially became co-founder is when we were accepted into Mass Challenge, which is a business accelerator. Essentially, what it does is it takes startup businesses for 4 months and puts you in an incubator space and gives you access to just some of the most amazing resources you could think of. Professors from Harvard come in and lecture about branding, marketing, insurance. You have access to incredible legal support. We had a guy who probably charges like $700 or $800 an hour, draft our corporate agreement, just all this stuff. But before I actually jumped full time into my role as co-founder, I did leave City Year, and at that point, Andy gave me some ownership of the company, and the rest is history. We've been building it ever since.
Wow. So you dropped out of a PhD to come to Bootstrap.
Well, not only did I drop out of a PhD,
You left that whole field.
I left the whole field, and then I started a new field, communications and marketing and filmmaking. And I was actually gaining some traction as a freelance filmmaker. And then I got a job at City Year with benefits and a salary and full time as their first ever communications coordinator. I basically rebranded their whore. I just said whore.
Their whole whore.
Basically they tasked me with like, among other things, rebranding their social media, making films for them, for fundraising events, for online stuffs.
Was that probably like at the wave of like all the social media, YouTube stuff that they were jumping
That was like when
onto?
Google Plus was becoming popular. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So, and that was when actually I still had a lot of hope for social media as a place for positive change. I think times have changed since then. But at that point, I was very optimistic about social media being a tool that will make humans more intelligent and more sensitive towards one another.
Gotta be honest, I feel like it's going the opposite way now.
I don't know. I spent several hours on Twitter this morning, and much of that was on a thread of it started with the Twitter account Dog Rates, and I just was sobbing the whole time. So that was
Dog rates?
yeah.
What was it about?
Well, it was this person. So Dog Rates is a Twitter account that people send in pictures of their dog, and this person rates the dog and like says something witty about it. And it's great. And so all the time people will like send pictures of their dog and say like dog rates, like please rate my dog. And so it was this person who sent a picture of their dog, and they said, like basically like my dog was going to be put down tomorrow. Dog rates, will you please rate this dog? And it was all these people responding, and this is what had me literally sobbing, was like all these people sending pictures of their dogs who like had already passed, and they'd be like, Goldilocks is there on the other side of the Golden Bridge to show your dog where all the treats are. And it was very touching and like very sweet, and it's gonna make me
But what's
cry
the
again.
goal here? Are people trying to adopt a dog?
No, it's just like for the love of dogs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The funny thing is that all of the dogs are, it's a 10-point scale, and they're all rated higher than 10. Like that's the whole thing is like every dog is more than perfect. So, so
I love
it's like-
dogs. Don't get me wrong, but at that point, Twitter and social media were leading like social revolutions across the world. And I was really hoping, and I was working on some projects that were international. I was really hoping that it would bring more intelligence and creativity and power, not only to people in the United States, but also in like Africa and in Asia and just across the world, and just unite us. And um, my thoughts have changed since then.
It's almost like I left Facebook for that reason, but it's almost like you really have to try to find the dog rates and not get sucked into all the negativity happening. That's why I left. I'm only on Instagram now, and I think the only things that I follow is Bootstrap, myself, and like a couple family members. And like that's it. You know.
Do you like your own posts?
No. Can you? Can you like your own posts?
yeah, you can.
I probably should then. I was just telling Emma earlier, I try not to post, but I find myself posting. I'm like, I just want to be that guy with no post that just looks at everything else, but I do.
See, I always think those people are weird.
Yeah, I know.
When,
Creep shows.
yeah, I get like random family members who trying to follow me, and they're like 0 posts, protected account, and I'm like, what's the point of this?
I still do believe in Instagram because imagery and photography is a whole nother kind of world, and I'm exposed to a lot of, just interesting ideas and travel places that I've never seen before just by going through an Instagram feed. So
I follow that stuff too. It's nice. All the nature stuff, man. Nat Geo. It's all my likes right there.
I won't name drop anyone, but there's some good ones out there.
Okay.
Bootstrap Compost is good.
That is a good one. Emma, how did you get into Bootstrap?
It's a good question. Let's see. I moved to Boston in the summer of 2014 from New Hampshire. I just graduated college and had literally no idea what I wanted to do. And I had some like super lousy job, like selling Verizon Fios, like some stupid, like one of those, like, it's like basically a fake job. I don't know.
A fake job.
Yeah, it was not real. It was like you'll get paid at the minimum $300 a week, but for every week that you don't make X amount in sales, like it counts against you, and then when you start clearing X amount in sales, like you have to pay us back. It was
What?
like, yeah, like really a fake job. So I got out real fast. I would like,
My God.
yeah, they explained that, and I was like, yeah, bye, never coming back. So anyway, so then one day I saw a truck that I think it, like in retrospect, it was actually a truck for Save That Stuff. But it said like Compost on it. And I was like, oh, like that's so cool. I like grew up composting in New Hampshire. The town where I grew up has a pay as you throw trash program. So you have to buy special bags in order to go, like to bring your waste to the transfer station. So like we composted because you're crazy not to, especially when you have the space and the ability and time to do it. So yeah, I was living in a little apartment in Alston, and I was like, oh, I want to compost here. So I go online and find, search composting in Boston, find Bootstrap. It's like the first 12 hits are all Bootstrap, and it's great. And so
You're welcome.
Yep. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, yeah, I can't afford this. Like I have no job and no income. And, at the time it was like, I think at the time it was $10 for biweekly service. And I was like $20 a month. I could either get a gym membership or I could compost, and I'm going to get a gym membership. So I sent them an email, and I was like, hey, are you like looking for volunteers, or are you hiring? Like, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Would love to be involved. And Andy wrote back to me, and he was like, yeah, like send us your resume. So I did. And he was like, do you have a car? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, cool, come in for an interview. And so I went in, and they hired me. Igor was away at the time. I didn't meet Igor for like the first like month or two that I worked at Bootstrap. It was pretty funny. They hired me I was driving 1 day a week in my own car, going to offices downtown. And I drive this like little like 2-door Volkswagen Golf, like very small car, and it was like kind of a joke. And but they paid me really well, and to kind of make up for the fact that I was in my own car.
Pay for
and,
your detailing.
yeah, I'm still waiting on that, but
Sorry.
yeah. So I 1 day a week going into offices, picking up compost from offices downtown, and then from there, like, added a shift in the warehouse, and then after a few months, we bought our second van, and we're ready to open up more routes. And so at that point, Andy and Igor asked if I was interested in taking on some more driving shifts, and so just kind of like built my way up and kind of learned all these things. And somewhere in there started with the Instagram thing, and at one point I said like, hey, your Twitter is kind of lame, like, can I help you out with that? And
I think, you
Yeah.
know, at that point when we brought you in, we were just a really ragtag bunch. And I was still, you know, going back to my point, as I did end up leaving sort of a second career at City Year, this communications thing, and kind of entering into this world of business and startup development. And then when Emma came in, we were like doing Mass Challenge and working out of my backyard, working out of Andy's backyard. We actually would run a hose from my kitchen faucet in my apartment building in JP. I would have to fill up pitchers of water for my roommates. I was so broke at the time. I was living with 8 people. And so I'd fill up pitchers and I'd say, sorry guys, I got to run the hose. And then we'd attach the hose to the kitchen sink and run it 3 stories down so our employees could clean buckets in the backyard. I mean, that's how...
Like you were cleaning in your backyard through a hose?
Yes, and we would occasionally buy the
this was-
neighbor's pizza so they wouldn't complain about the
nice.
smell to the city.
Yeah.
And then we had Emma, and then we had a
This
few
was
other
pre-warehouse.
employees. Yeah, pre-warehouse. And it was like the Wild West. I mean, between going to Mass Challenge and learning about all this really awesome, like, high-level business stuff that we never thought we would ever use, but we wanted to know it and do it, to, like, managing day-to-day operations with drivers in their own cars and people on bicycles. And it was just wild. It was an amazing
I
experience.
actually saw, when I was looking at like some of your YouTube videos, I think this might have been the video you were talking about, but Andy was riding his bike around with like a trailer full of buckets. So
that wasn't Andy. That was a different employee, but that is one of our videos. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I used to do that too. At one point, I took on that position and was riding around JP.
Where are the bikes now?
Well, we're too big for bikes.
Nah, man. No, we're too big for bikes. You should get like a bike crew going just for the local area.
I wouldn't say we're too big for bikes. It's logistically very hard, and it's more efficient to well, Emma can speak on this, I think, being the director of operations at this point.
yeah, I think Igor's right. It's more efficient to be able to cluster dense groups of subscribers together and do it in a van. It's definitely better for, well, there are a lot of other costs to driving, including insurance and gas and maintenance, but being able to send a driver in a van and be able to say, like in Somerville, for example, we have, I think, over 500 subscribers in Somerville alone right now, which is crazy given that it's only 4 square miles. So those routes, like, you can't collect 70 buckets on a bicycle no matter how big your trailer is. And if you can spatially make it work, you can't physically carry that. Like, you can't haul 70 buckets times each one is, on average, is like maybe 12 to 17 pounds on average. And
Right.
like that's
It comes down to just sustainable economics too.
yeah.
Like, how many people would we have to? We would go bankrupt employing, 17
The bike
cyclists in Somerville, and environmentally, you're burning off. You're offsetting a lot of greenhouse gases through the process of composting. So even though we're sending a vehicle out that's burning carbon dioxide, we're saving so much more by offsetting that through the process of composting in a big ratio. And if you had 17 cyclists serving Somerville, I'm pretty sure they'd be hungry, and we'd have to feed them, and they'd have to buy water and buy food. And even the environmental people kind of used to yell at us like, "Oh, you're all van only now? What a bunch of sellouts." I'm like, guys, you're missing the big picture. We're doing more with less, and we're doing more for the environment
Right,
by
you can
doing.
offset more by doing it. So with that, because I thought about that too, is like, okay, we're protecting the environment, but we're putting more vans on the road. But how does composting work where it's kind of not purifying the air, or is it? How does it work? Like,
It
how
is-
does dirt do that?
It is. It's not purifying the. Well, it is, and okay.
It's kind of using.
There's two
the
things that are
carbon,
going
right?
on. There's the actual composting process compared to landfilling food waste, offsets methane gas. Food scraps that are left alone in your backyard or in a landfill, they produce methane gas. But when you add oxygen, you turn them, you add water, you create carbon dioxide, which is 14 to 20 times less potent than methane gas. So you're offsetting it that way. But then there's this whole new, and this is a trending topic in soil science, is carbon sequestration. So soil is actually able to take carbon out of the atmosphere. Plants need carbon to grow. Soil needs carbon to grow plants. Soil is able to absorb carbon from the atmosphere and able to use it as a nutrient. And I'm sure Emma has more to add. She is a certified master composter.
Oh.
So,
You pretty much covered it.
well, you went through a certified composting program in Maine. It's
Yeah.
a 1 week program, I believe.
It's a 1 week
super
program.
intensive.
It's super intensive.
Does it get down to like chemistry and like all that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of chemistry. The program it's called the Maine Compost School, and it's run by Mark King, who's the he works for the Maine DEP, and he's great. It's a great program. Really, it's a more practical way to understand how to compost, especially at a larger scale. So, like, there are some people who do the course to learn about home composting, but most of the people there are trying to, they've got farms and, large operations that they're trying to compost large scale. So the course is about building a recipe and understanding like the economics of compost, and also a little bit about the environmental benefits, but really not as much as you might think. It's also like the practical side of composting. So, for example, every day we took field trips out to different composting operations in central Maine, and I think 2 or 3 of them at least were what's the word? It's like their wastewater treatment centers. So the biosolids and the water are separated, and then the biosolids are being composted, and it's amazing. First of all, the scale at which they're composting human waste, and secondly, how well they're doing it. You walk in these places and it doesn't smell.
This is in Maine?
In Maine, yeah. So the course is really like teaching you how to compost in a really practical way.
Can you do it wrong?
Yeah, definitely.
So like if my neighbor was to be like, yeah, I'm going to start a compost pile, can he completely do it wrong?
Yes.
I'm doing it wrong currently in my backyard.
Yeah, so it's all about the recipe. You want to have a good ratio of carbon to nitrogen. And
3 to 1.
yeah, in practical matters, it's 3 to 1. But in terms of like the scientific parts, it's actually like 30 to 1. Carbon being
What is carbon?
Carbon is a basic element.
So carbon. What is a carbon source?
Carbon source. It can be leaves, dried leaves, trees, mulch, sawdust, wood chips.
Can grass?
Grass?
Dry grass?
Well, it's a good question.
Like you empty your lawnmower, throw the grass in there.
It's probably closer to a nitrogen source. It's not bad, but I wouldn't use that as your only carbon source.
Also, if you're putting chemicals on your lawn, then you
Yeah,
probably don't want to
true.
put that in the compost pile.
True. Yeah.
But you can mulch your lawn with it.
Yeah. Typically, sawdust and like wood chips, wood shavings are among the best.
Which is what
sources
most
of
home composters lack,
Right.
including me. I throw my food scraps in there, but I don't have a lot of carbon sources. Trees only fall once a year.
Right.
I've got a heap of them someplace, but I don't take the time to maybe take those leaves and throw them into the. It's a big, and this is one of the reasons why people sign up for Bootstrap, because to do composting properly, you
effort, a
need
lot of effort.
space, you need time, and you need enthusiasm. And a lot of people don't have those things, especially living in a city. And so we're doing it properly with our farming partners. So why not pay a small fee to get that service done for you the right way, where you don't have your vegetables. I call it backyard landfills. Mine is probably somewhat something like that, because it's just releasing methane gas. It's not really, I turn it every once in a while, but it's never going to produce choice compost that I'm going to put on my vegetable garden.
Right. Okay. Methane gas. Quick question. I watched this documentary recently. Do you guys believe that livestock is contributing to global warming?
Yes.
Do you know the documentary I'm talking about?
No, maybe. I didn't. There's so many.
Cowspiracy.
Oh,
Cowspiracy, yeah.
Okay. Because I thought that was wicked interesting. You think about it, and you guys are talking about all this methane released as a big problem, and cows release methane. And if we're over relying on all these cows, like, is that contributing to all this? Just curious, because I don't eat meat anymore.
My take is that, like, yes, the cows are releasing methane, but it's more about the other resources that are going into producing fat livestock that are contributing to global warming.
Antibiotics and all that crap.
Well, not even. It's that you're growing shit ton of corn, which cows aren't really meant to eat corn, but you're growing a lot of corn to feed the cows.
Shit ton is a cuss word.
So
That's
sorry.
okay. We can cuss here.
You're growing a heck of a lot of corn to feed these cows.
Big old batch.
It requires a lot of water. All the resource into growing the corn. And then feeding these cows, fattening them up. The methane when they do their little cow toots, like that's it's a factor, but in my opinion, it's the smaller factor.
Agriculture is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. I think it's second or third behind the energy and the transportation sector.
Okay, because their claim was that it was more so than transportation, which I was like,
I'm not sure, but with cows and with livestock in general, it's one of the things that I would like to add to Emma's comments is the fact that we're grazing so much. We're basically cutting down rainforests in the Amazon jungle. We're cutting down forests everywhere across the world to make room for this type of food, which eventually it will lead to food. And then we're also using animals require a lot of water. I mean, I have a dog. The dog needs water. The dog needs food. Cows need water. Cows need food. So we're using a lot of resources that are used for those resources to produce those resources in the first place. And so it's definitely an unsustainable practice with the amount of people that we have in the world.
Also, I read a thing saying that composted soil, when used, can protect the water somehow from runoff or something like that. How does that?
Yeah, so it aids in water retention.
Yes. So how? Isn't it dirt?
It's a very complicated and long question.
But I'm interested.
Go for it, Emma. And I can add.
Yeah, so compost isn't, first of all, it's not soil. It's not a complete soil. It's just a soil amendment. So it doesn't have like all of the micro and macronutrients that soil has, or all of the inorganic matter that soil has. So when you add compost into soil, you're basically like building a more robust
It's like
product.
fortified, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's a more fortified product that can just like, it has more absorption capacity, so it'll retain more water, which ultimately will help crops like be able to drink from that soil longer, so you don't have to water as much, and that's one way that you're reducing your overall footprint when you're using compost. That was not really the answer to the question.
I kind of get it.
I'm just looking this up right now on my phone.
Google.
Statistics of soil erosion. So currently in our conventional agricultural system, what we're doing is we're basically taking land and pumping macronutrients into it, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, I believe.
NPK. Yep.
And we're not creating a healthy soil environment. So imagine like showering all this soil with with these NPK enhancers. The plants grow. It's enough for a plant to grow, but it leaves the soil tremendously unhealthy. And when a soil is unhealthy, it is more prone to erosion. And trying to see here if I have a stat. I have the email pulled up. There's one that says conventionally plowed farms erode soil away at a similar rate to alpine and glaciated topography, which is actually pretty fast. Glaciers go pretty fast, relatively speaking. But anyway, so when it's dry out, the soil is getting blown away because it has no structure to it. And when it's not a drought, when it's raining a lot, the soil is getting washed away. And with that washing away, you've got all these chemical fertilizers that are also getting washed away. So you're basically kind of, I don't know, you're creating these fertilizers, then they're getting washed away. You don't really have any soil. It's a very imbalanced system currently. Compost helps to restore that balance by being a natural, nutrient-rich absorber of, because it's loose, it's fluffy. You visited Bootstrap compost. You know that compost can hold moisture more than than dry soil can, for example, than dry, crappy soil can. So in that sense, it can help with this whole problem of soil erosion and water retention. I mean, when you think back in the United States, there was that, what was that, the Great Drought, or what was that called?
The Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl, right? And that's because we cleared a lot of forest land and farmed it until the land could no longer give us anything anymore. Right. And that's sort of what we're doing now. We're farming land until it can no longer give us anything anymore.
You think we'll get to another Dust Bowl eventually?
I mean, China's had some Dust Bowls pretty recently in the past decade. I wouldn't be surprised if we had one. I mean, the way like I said, I just mentioned the statistics. We're eroding soil pretty quickly, and we need to figure out how to create a more balanced system of agriculture. And that includes compost, and that includes regenerative farming. That actually does include livestock too, for grazing, for pooping on the soil, for creating fertilizer, and that's natural fertilizers in that sense. That includes no-till agriculture, where you're not, chopping up all this soil and then putting these chemicals on it. And the next thing you know, it's all gone because there was a flood, another 100-year flood, whatever.
Right. You're just kind of recycling, reusing it, right?
With what? Regenerative agriculture? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're basically just using the land for the purpose of the land to grow crops. You're not hijacking the land. You're working with the land. You're working with nature to grow your food instead of kind of imposing these chemical methods on it to what once was called the Green Revolution. But if you do your research and you look at India, it destroyed a lot of India farmland when the United States came over there and said, hey, here's a bunch of fertilizers and chemicals. Right? They didn't know what to do with it. They overused them, and then, a bunch of their farmland's gone.
So I'm super interested in this because I go up to New Hampshire a lot. I used to have summer houses up there. Love it. And one of my dreams is to live up there on my own little farm and not have to go to the grocery store and live sustainably, just do my own thing. I wouldn't have chickens because I'm a vegetarian, but I would grow my own garden and compost. So how does someone who wants to live this lifestyle make changes in their lives now? So like what would they do? Like how can they
Are you talking about permaculture and just completely living
perm-
off the grid?
what's permaculture? That sounds great.
Do you want to talk about permaculture, or do you want me to
I
talk about it?
think you know more about permaculture.
Well, permaculture is sort of the same principle as regenerative agriculture, but it also incorporates elements of energy into it as well. So, for example, not only are you rotating crops, not only are you doing no-till, not only are you growing the right kind of crops for the right kind of climate,
Using cover crops.
you're using cover crops, you're using a little bit of livestock to help with the grazing process and the creation of natural fertilizers, which is cow dung or
So it's like you're building a little ecosystem.
right. And then on top of that, you're not investing in energy because you're using that fertilizer to create again methane gas, and then you capture the gas, and then you can power your stoves in your kitchen with it.
How
And
does
so you have
that
this
work?
closed loop system within your own acre, 2, 3, 4, 5 acres of land. How does it work? Again, you set up a big old like thing, like a well essentially, and you put water in there, and you put cow dung in there, and you can put other kinds of things that would produce methane gas and calorie rich items, as they would call them. Food scraps can go in there and produce methane gas. And then you have like a little tube going. I mean, I don't know the exact system. I've never
Right.
built one, but essentially you can capture methane gas that way and then funnel it through piping and then create heat and energy, and then your lighting would probably come from some kind of a solar source or some kind of a wind source. So that's kind of off the grid. That's less. That's the electricity component is less permaculture. But yeah, permaculture is basically setting up like the right kind of ecosystem. You also want to set up pollinators or attract pollinators by setting up like not only do you have the food and the vegetables, but you also want your flowers and different crops that will attract the bees. And then you're kind of setting up this robust ecosystem that kind of feeds itself. But you certainly need a good chunk of land. You can't just do it with a couple of raised beds.
True. Can't afford the land today either.
Maybe in New Hampshire.
Depends. Parts of New Hampshire are pretty pricey.
Maine's, having a big sale, I heard.
Are they?
Yeah.
Maine's on sale.
Buy one, get one.
Nice. All right, but what about around here? Besides using Bootstrap, what are some things that people can do that maybe live in, around here? Maybe Jamaica Plain, Cambridge, to reduce their carbon footprint or...
So there are a lot of things you can do to be a little bit more green. One thing I started doing the last few months is I have a stainless steel cup that I use, and it's good for hot and cold drinks. And that way, like when I go to Dunkin' Donuts, like nearly every day, more than I want to admit, I just like hand them the cup and they refill it, and then I'm not using a plastic cup, plastic straw every day. And that, that helps. Like that's, one fewer thing that I'm not throwing away, throwing in a landfill, throwing to this like recycling bin that's like probably actually not going to get recycled given the current climate of recycling. So things like that, finding grocery stores or local grocers that have produce, locally grown, farmers markets. I live in CSAs, yeah. I live in a neighborhood of Somerville that has a little, it's called Neighborhood Produce. It's a little tiny storefront with a lot of products, and it's all mostly, I think it's mostly from Massachusetts as much as possible, but also New England, and it's just like super locally sourced. It has the like bulk bins so that you can go and you can just get as much like rice or pasta or beans or whatever as you need. So I just like bring my little jar and fill it up, and then I'm not buying like a crappy bag of rice from Stop and Shop. So those are things that I do that are really easy to change once you get used to it. I have friends who like take it a step further and they'll go out to eat and they'll bring like this like crazy container with like different like segments of it and put their leftovers in it. And I think one cardboard takeout box here and there is, you know, okay, but for me it's a question of moderation and not like absolute. I think a lot of people get discouraged by thinking that they have to like change everything immediately and then they change nothing. But they don't really realize that like, well, a small thing here or there actually makes a big difference
Right.
long term. Like in the last 2 months, like it's probably like 50 Dunkin' Donuts cups that I like haven't used. Which is, if
Adds up quick.
yeah, and if 10 people did that, that's 500. And if, like a small change, that makes a really big impact.
Yeah, I mean, on the individual level, there's so many different things you can do. You can ride your bike to work if that's possible, or take public transport. You can take shorter showers or take cold showers in the summer, so you're not heating, you're heating water, which is, a big component. You can get more energy efficient appliances. But for me, when it comes to food and food waste, 50% of all food waste is created by consumers. So watch how you're buying and watch what you're buying. I had a roommate, I'm not going to mention him by name, but he would buy a big one of those Olivia's boxes of mixed greens every time he went to the grocery store. And then he would be so busy and go out to eat half the week. That box, almost inevitably, half of it would always go and be thrown in the compost. At least it was getting thrown in the compost, but there are so many households with this indulgent, wasteful lifestyle that we are living in America these days that are just going to Costco and going and overbuying and filling up their fridges. And then 2 months later, when they're cleaning out the fridge, they realized, hey, we haven't eaten half the stuff we bought. And that's a little bit silly to me because you're losing a lot of money, first of all, especially for a family of four. If you're not eating half your food, that's the average family is a family of four. If you're not eating half your food, I mean, you're wasting a lot of money. But second of all, you're also just hurting the planet without even wanting to do so on purpose. You're accidentally doing this thing that you're just ingrained to do. Oh, and there's a great deal at Stop and Shop, 10 avocados for the price of 5.
I don't need 10, but I'm gonna get them.
You just have to be more conscious and smart, and it's not really that hard. And as Emma alluded, and one of the things I liked about Andy's ethos when I first joined Bootstrap is that we're not trying to tell you not to eat meat. We're not trying to tell you to ride your bike every day. All we're saying is maybe you could not eat a hamburger every day. Maybe you could occasionally take a bicycle to the grocery store. Maybe you could get a water bottle that is reusable.
Right.
Little things, and they will add up. But then there's big global changes that need to happen as well.
Yeah, and it all starts with the individual, though. So I think like our culture is so found around like speed and convenience and me. Like, how does this affect me? That they just innately don't think of these things. And I think of it, I could do better, but like I think of it all the time, which is why I love what you guys do, which is why I brought you on. And I want to learn more, but I think a lot needs to happen.
Well, with our
it's kind of
service-
scary the way that we're going.
With our service, it brings a lot of that awareness to people. First of all, they realize how much food waste has been going into their trash can instead of being used for a greater purpose, which is the creation of soil amendment. Second of all, it's making them realize, why am I throwing out all this food when I don't have to, right? And we, even though it kind of contradicts our whole business model, we encourage people to waste less, even if that means not using Bootstrap, because ultimately that's the goal, is waste less.
We recently did a pilot with the city of Newton, and the woman who directed that pilot for the city, her name is Juanita, and part of the pilot was an educational component for the households that participated. And she said something that I really liked. Well, there's two things. First is to encourage you to waste less. That she encourages people to have a bin in the refrigerator or a section of the refrigerator that's like, use this first, so that like when your kids are looking for a snack or you're like bored and you're just like bored eating or like whatever, oh, look on this shelf first and see like, oh, this peach is perfect, like I'm gonna eat it now. And I thought that was really cool. The other thing that she said that I really liked is that the purpose of having the bucket is not to fill the bucket, but it's to train yourself to waste less. So it goes back to like buying less at the grocery store, only buying what you need and what you know you're going to use like for that given time period. Like I go to the store like 2-3 times a week because I'm only buying produce for 2 days at a time. And that helps me waste less, and I save a ton of money. Like I'm not throwing any food away. So
Yeah, and in a global context, or in at least in a national context, we're throwing away a lot of food on the grocery store level as well. I mean, we have produce that's being thrown away because it's considered ugly, so it won't be sold. And that's tons and tons of produce. We have produce being thrown away because it's being shipped from far away and it goes bad along the way. So there are many reasons to kind of try to look for local solutions. And people are often put off by local because they might think it's pricier. But there have been studies done that show farmers markets and supporting or investing in a community supported agricultural program, a CSA, which is essentially a box of produce that's delivered to you, or you go and pick it up from a local farmer every week or every 2 weeks. Those are actually less expensive than buying your food conventionally. And I also encourage people to look and see what their options are as far as organic. Sometimes you go to a farmer's market and a farmer is not certified organic, but they're growing their food to the best possible practices that they can. It just so happens that buying a certification to become an organic farmer costs upwards of 100,000. You can't quote me on that, but it costs
lot.
It costs a lot of money that most, mom and pop farmers can't afford. So in that case, maybe you should just buy it from them anyway, even though it's not certified organic, because they're putting their heart and soul into
Right.
this.
right.
And I think a big part of this is we're losing our heart and soul when it comes to the food system. We're losing the idea that the meat you bought did come from a dying cow that was hanging upside down bleeding. And if you're okay with eating it, then you're okay with eating it. I eat meat. I'm okay with it. I understand where it's coming from. But we're also buying, the cheapest, peaches around or avocados, and those are all getting imported from 3,500 miles away, which is like half the world away. And so there's this kind of disconnect between where the food is grown, how it's transported, how it ends up in a grocery store, and what ends up in a grocery store, and then kind of what ends up in our bellies. And I think part of Bootstrap and part of my personal goal in my life is to just bridge that gap and kind of understand that, there's a reason that before dinner people would say prayer and be grateful for their food, because it is something we should be grateful for. And I think we've become ungrateful. I think we've become such a society of convenience and smart technology and emails, and we're just too busy for all that. And in a day and age when we're developing technology and trying to save the world with, batteries that can hold renewable energies, with devices, like there's fridges now that can actually tell you when you're running out of something, or which seems a little crazy to me. Why can't you just look inside the fridge and check? But anyway, I think it's not a bad idea, but we also need to remember that there's also a natural component of this earth that brought us here, and there's a reason that humans have been here for 18,000 plus years, is because we've been able to nurture the planet and work with the planet, and we're not doing that anymore. At least not on a large scale level. We need to kind of figure out where the balance is between conventional agriculture, which can feed a lot of people but might be a detriment to the planet, and also regenerative and permaculture, which might feed less people but will feed less people for a longer time and take care of our soils and prevent droughts, and not prevent droughts, but help prevent soil depletion and crop depletion during droughts, and the dying of the dying of what's the cows? What are those called again?
Cows, livestock.
Livestock, yeah, the dying of livestock during droughts, and then on top of it during flooding. These floods, a lot of them are caused. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. It's basically a size the area of New Jersey, I believe, and every spring it gets all that nitrogen and potassium and phosphorus that's being used by all the Midwestern farmers,
Kills everything.
and it kills it. It does and it doesn't. What it doesn't kill is algae. It grows a lot of algae, and then the algae takes up all the oxygen, and then shrimp and fish and other biodiversity that would typically be found in the Gulf of Mexico can't live there. So it's destroying fishing villages too. So there are these radical economical and policy and consumer kind of changes that we need to think about, and think about how we want to move forward as a society and what we want to embrace and what we don't want to embrace. Because at this point, with approaching 7 billion people, we need to figure out how we're going to feed everybody. And whether that's reducing food waste, yes, that's one of them. Whether that's using compost and natural means to grow food, yes, that's one of them. Whether it's using technology to help with that, yes, that's also one of them. But let's not be so dependent on science and technology to move us forward, because in some ways it has moved us backward.
I love that, and I talk about that all the time because we're getting so reliant on technology that do you think today the generations coming up that are a little bit younger than us, are they going to be able to survive without technology at all? Because there could be something as simple as a solar flare that wipes out the entire power grid. And if we're relying on all this technology, then where are we going to be? Right?
I mean,
It's feasible. It happened in 1859, wiped out the whole entire power grid. What are we going to do with no technology? That's what I'm getting at. That's why I'm getting off of Facebook. My phone's being shut off earlier and earlier for longer. Like, I'm realizing that we're becoming over-reliant on technology.
well, we're relying on
back to
energy.
nature.
We've been relying on energy for a long time, beginning with the Industrial Revolution. I think we're just moving in a place that's kind of becoming more and more like distant from the reality of the world. I think first we have the computer, right? And there are these massive computers. Well, first we have TV, then we have the computer, and there's these massive computers at like MIT. Then we have computers that are shrunk down and they're desktops, then they're laptops. Next thing you know, they're in our hand. What's next? You were talking about implants, I think that's probably what's next. You get a little implant in your arm, and then you can kind of like almost like the Minority Report, visualize everything that's in front of you.
Live in the Matrix.
And you're kind of like being disconnected from reality, and we're kind of moving more and more forward toward artificial intelligence. And what's the end goal? Are we just going to have a bunch of robots walking around doing the work for us? How are we going to function as a society if we don't know the basics? How to build a house? I mean, you were just telling me how you just built the studio or made additions to it today. I like to be crafty with my hands too. So does Emma. I like to garden. I know how to grow food at this point. I mean, those are skills that we need to encourage people to do, and hopefully technology can help us encourage to, learn about those things. But I don't currently see it that way. I wanted to see it that way, but it seems like we're moving farther and farther away from, nature and the environment, and more towards kind of this artificial intelligence lifestyle, which if you watch any sci-fi or horror or whatever, it's not going anywhere.
There you go with that word
good.
again, horror.
I know, I'm a bit
horror.
of a pessimist.
Okay, I got it.
Oh, horror, I get it. Yeah, gotcha. I don't know, Emma, I'd like to hear your thoughts on technology, though, and what you think is going on.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's scary. It's scary seeing little kids like 2, 3, 4 years old, like working an iPad better than I can.
Oh my God. My son is turning 3 next week. When he was 6 months old, it's like kids today innately just know how to do this. He was using my iPhone. He's got his own tablet at home. He gets on YouTube and is scrolling, and it's messed up.
Well,
it's scary.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about it is I've a strangely high proportion of friends who are occupational therapists, and what's really scary about it is like all these kids are like using technology, and then they like don't have all of the sensory and tactile stimulation as little kids, and so then they have like other issues where they can't like being in a classroom without having help, and they can't, like their brains aren't functioning the same way, and that's because they're not like outside playing, and they're not like, getting thrown up in the air, thrown into a lake, like having those interactions, the like
Stuff that we had.
yeah, like I grew up like, I get like put on the back of a tube on the back of a boat in a lake,
Hell
and like
yeah.
just get thrown all over, and as a little kid, and kids aren't doing that anymore. They're just like on YouTube.
Right.
And it's messing up their ability to like think and function in the world.
I do have a cool story though about like a big turnaround that I've seen in my life pretty recently. My girlfriend moved in and she has a 5-year-old son, and they were living in a small apartment in Revere before with like little park space, so they'd have to drive to the park. There was no backyard. I'm fortunate to live in a house with a backyard with gardening, and it used to be that Oliver would come home and kind of sit on his tablet and do all that or play indoors. But since he's moved, and also the weather being good the way it is, he's really kind of embraced and helped me out with like watering the garden and looking at the garden and learning and being amazed by the fact that there's a cucumber growing from a cucumber
That's
plant or a
awesome.
tomato. And I think last week he came home and his mom asked him, "Hey, do you want to watch tablet?" And he's like, "No, I just want to go play outside with a dog." And that was cool for a 5-year-old. And that was a big turnaround. And that's something that, whether we're parents or whether we're educators or whether we're just citizens, is something we can really encourage among our peers and society is get your kid outside, get your kid to the playground.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not forget about that.
So with that, and I have this conversation with people all the time, but it's messed up that you're noticing that he would rather have gone outside than stay inside. Like when we were kids, there was no question. It's like, I'm going outside. I'm riding my bike. But today I see, like, I'm driving home from work and I take all the back roads off the highway, go through neighborhoods, and I don't see kids. And I don't see kids on bikes. And I know that they're there. And it's like, when you do see kids outside, you notice it. You're like, oh shit. Yeah, they're out playing basketball, but you don't see that anymore. It's so messed up that when you do, it hits you like, hey, there's children. Where are they all the other times? It's messed up. I don't like it.
I haven't personally witnessed that, but
No?
no. I definitely see a lot of kids outside, but I think there is a tendency for people who might not have access to a yard or they're living in, condos or apartment blocks. Maybe in that case, they're probably inside more. But I think generally kids, if they have the ability and access to outdoor spaces, I think they want to go out there. It just so happens that in an urban environment, it is a concrete jungle sometimes, and there really is nowhere to go but be inside.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't speak about the suburbs. I don't live in the
I just
suburbs.
know that I'm comparing it to me growing up around here, and there was like 20 bikes in my yard. Like there were kids all over the place. You just don't see them around here anymore. Like even the parks, like I can take my kid to the park and have the whole place to myself if I want. There might be like a couple kids, but that place used to be packed when I was younger. I mean, it could be that they're moving out or they're playing with tablets. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of kids in
But-
my life.
On the Bootstrap front, what's cool is we've gotten a lot of videos and a lot of like thank you letters and notes even from kids and pictures about them learning how to compost. And I think Bootstrap in one way is playing a role in educating the future generations. If you're 3 years old and you can use a tablet, then you can probably figure out how to compost a banana peel.
I think so. So then with that, what are you guys doing with the community? Are you going out to schools? Are you having like science? Because I know that you guys have had a couple school field trips to you, right?
Yeah, we have school groups that come and visit us. We also do a lot of going to schools and visiting classrooms. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. I think now we have a few like recurring groups that come back year after year. So Lance Lake Farm in Weston, they just visited a week or two ago. And they've been coming to us for the last 2, 3, 4 years, something like that, to learn about composting. And so that's really cool to see that like kind of recurring thing. But yeah, we do a lot of outreach with kids. We also do a lot of outreach. Like Igor does a lot of outreach with some older populations, like older like high schooler students.
High school or university or
Yeah,
grad school even.
talking more about like, well, I mean, you can like running a
Talking,
business and like a
yeah.
green business.
Entrepreneurship, social responsibility, um, like some of these higher level concepts of, organic farming versus conventional farming versus permaculture. Some of that stuff I've given talks on. With kids, though, and going back to this topic, I think kids are just naturally curious, right? They're curious about so many things. They go up to you and they always ask you, "What's this?" Dad, or "What's this?" And when they come in or we go to a school and we bring out earthworms, maybe one or two of them are like, "Ew, gross," but the majority of them is fascinated by worms and dirt and by plants and growth. And I think that just tells me, I think that gives me like a positive sign, is that somewhere in our DNA it is ingrained that we should be with nature and that we should be, really enthusiastic and curious about these things. And it's really rewarding on a person level, having worked with some of the younger ones and some of the older ones, to just see like that sparkle in their eye that, they're learning something new and they kind of understand that this is better for the environment. And even Oliver comes to me and asks me, "Is this compostable? Or should I throw this in the blue bin or the gray bin, being recycling or trash?"
Yeah. It's
So,
funny. I have my son now walking. We'll walk and he'll see trash and he'll be like, "That's not biodegradable." I'm like, "Yes." It's so funny. And then he'll like throw a banana peel out the car window and he's like, "It's okay. The bugs eat it." I'm like, "Okay. All right. Almost."
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Don't throw shit out the window.
it
please.
is one of our tiers of our mission. Is the first off, we keep food waste out of landfills. Second off, we use that food waste to create compost. Third, we're reducing greenhouse gases through doing that, or offsetting greenhouse gases through doing that. And then fourth is kind of giving back to the community in financial ways, through donations, through compost donations as well, but also in these larger esoteric kind of educational methods that we're going out there. And we don't charge for those things. That's part of the service. Unless you're like a corporation, you want me to come talk, we're not gonna charge you for that. We want to educate kids and spread the word, and hopefully in 20 years they can sign up for a service.
Well,
Get one visit.
but
I'm just kidding.
they'll go home and tell their parents about it, and their parents will sign up for service.
Which has happened many times.
We've seen that a lot. Or like pictures and videos like on Twitter and Instagram of people tweeting to us or sending us things of like, "Oh, like my kid learned about composting today." Yeah. Yeah, so it's really cool. It's really rewarding, and it's cool to like see it grow and see the kids, like, yeah, exactly as Igor said, like get really excited. Like I personally get really excited when I like feed the worms at Bootstrap, but like I love setting up all the bins and like giving kids food and saying like, "All right, now it's your turn," and they like, rip it up into parts and throw it in, and then they like find worms and they'll grab it and be like, "This is weird and gross and cool," and it's just like it's really cute and really cool because they're like learning about that.
Yeah.
You know.
So do you guys
life
put the
cycle.
worms in the compost that you sell? Like, what are the worms there for? Just to speed up?
Yeah, so vermicompost is just another way of composting. So we have specific bins that we've built, like a habitat for specific types of worms. So your like earthworm, you can go in the backyard and dig up an earthworm, and that's probably not going to do a lot of like heavy duty composting for you. But there are other breeds of worms, like red wigglers is a common one, and there are a bunch of varieties of night crawlers that some people say are good for compost, some not. And you put them in a bin with soil and bedding, like shredded paper or whatever you have access to, and food scraps. And as those food scraps are breaking down, as bacteria are breaking down the food scraps, the worms are feeding on the bacteria and then pooping it out just like a cow does, but on a much smaller level. And then that waste is called castings, and those worm castings are like another really valuable form of compost, finished compost. So yeah, so you can take a handful of that worm poop and put it on your tomato plant, and your tomato is going to love it.
Right, and what we do is we mix the stuff that we get from our farming partners with the worm castings. So that's kind of the Bootstrap blend. So you're getting the heroin of compost, which is like the worm castings, and then you're getting your pot,
Okay.
which is the regular compost, and then mixed together, you're like getting a really good,
Great analogy.
good high for your
Getting
plants.
a good high for your plants.
Love
Yeah.
it. So are there other businesses around like that do you guys team up with anyone, or is it just you around here? Because I don't see much.
They're competitors.
They're competitors.
Yeah. I would say though that what sets us apart is, this kind of I call it a quadruple bottom line concept, and it's actually one of my presentations I recently developed is, not only do we care about people, and that's our customers through really good customer service, and that's our employees through benefits, bonuses, and competitive wages and salaries, but we also care for the environment, of course. We care for our bottom line profits. We're not in this to be broke. We need to make a living and make money. And composting, say 1 ton of trash versus 1 ton. If you were to either compost or send 1 ton of waste to a landfill, it takes 4 jobs to do the composting. It only takes 1 job to do the landfill. So composting is more expensive to do. So in that sense, we have to be very careful about our profits, but we also have to realize we are a business, a for-profit business that has to feed ourselves and our employees. And then the fourth bottom line is really this idea of working with community groups to make this a better community and a better planet. And that includes the educational components we talked about. That includes our over-the-top, sometimes efforts to produce good social media content and online content. And also that includes, working with groups like Triangle, who put people with disabilities to work. And we have folks from Triangle come in 3 days a week, sometimes 4 days a week, to come in and help us in our warehouse, a population that's historically been marginalized, and we're proud to be able to offer them an opportunity. So all those things combined is what Bootstrap makes Bootstrap, and we're not in it to get rich or wealthy. We're just in it to run a sustainable business economically and environmentally and for the people.
I'd also add that everyone who works at Bootstrap is proud to work at Bootstrap. And I think that speaks a lot to the type of business that Bootstrap is, what the work that we're doing, but also the people that we're working with and people we're working for. I'm proud of Andy and Igor for getting Bootstrap this far. I'm proud of my colleagues for being so committed, and I think that also sets us apart in a lot of ways. I know a lot of people who are just my job's okay, or I hate this thing, or it doesn't really matter ultimately. But
You guys are all there for the same thing.
yeah, we're there for the same reason, and we recognize what we're doing really does matter, grand scheme. Even we've had drivers come to us in the past who are there just to drive, and over time started to understand oh, what is composting? Why is this important? And now these same people who at first early on, one of them was can I compost tinfoil? And I was like, well, no, you can't, but here's a learning opportunity. And now that same driver comes to me, he's like, yo, did you hear what's going on with this thing, or what's going on with that? That's so messed up. He's really excited to talk about the social and politics of it, and it's really cool. It's been really cool to watch people grow with Bootstrap over the last few years. So
That's great.
yeah.
So what's the hardest part about running your business or a business in general from like a entrepreneurial standpoint? Like, what are some things that you guys find?
Well, there were
Because I got a couple of things going on. What's the hardest thing?
it changes from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. Uh, it's not as hard as it used to be for me personally as a co-founder. It used to be incredibly long hours and very little pay, and trying to figure out why there wasn't enough money to go around and why. And we just had outdated systems, so we just had to rely on some new systems that we implemented and built and developed, and to help us, with payment, and getting paid, and just growing our customer base too, and believing in it. The first 3 to 4 years were just Andy and I just continuing to believe and continuing to think that, hey, well, we grew last month, so we're gonna grow next month. We grew last month, so we're gonna grow next month, and et cetera, et cetera. Even though we weren't making very much money doing it. Then came like kind of a second stage where, okay, we're making enough money now, but we maybe don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore or drive on the road all the time anymore. How do we make this into a more functional enterprise? And so then came a lot of growing pains with that, not maybe the best hiring practices, maybe not dealing with turnover very well. It all came down to like kind of employee stuff. And then kind of the latest phase has been, how do we support the emerging leaders, Emma included, Emma being, the director of operations now. And then we have a commercial billing manager, and we have a client billing manager, and now we have a customer service manager. That's technically not his title, but that's essentially what he is. We have a fleet manager, and we have a warehouse manager. So that is where Andy and I set aside our money and invested it in the growth and development of the company and the staff, and kind of now are letting more people than ever run the show at Bootstrap. And that was more by design than they might think, because we wanted to create an ecosystem where it wasn't top-down ideas from Andy and I anymore. It was, where can you guys take us so that you guys can be more prosperous, whether it's your knowledge, your lifestyle, or your pay. And so throughout, the history, there's always been a challenge. But right now, I feel like we have, and I've felt this way for close to a year now, we have the best team we've ever had. We have some really committed managers who are not afraid to voice their opinion, who are not afraid to challenge Andy and I and our beliefs, but who also respect us as being co-founders of the business, as being the brains behind the operation, as having thought this out. Now Emma has her own plate of, issues that she has to deal with on a day-to-day, which I used to do in that kind of a role myself. So what is a director of operations for a company that serves 2,500 clients and has 7 vehicles out on the road every single day?
What's my job? What do I?
I mean, what's the hardest thing for you?
Yeah, I think staffing is still the hardest thing for me. We still have turnover. We have a driver, really, really like well-loved driver who's moving away in a few weeks, and so now we're faced with like, how do we replace this person? And finding the right fit. Luckily, they let us know well in advance, so I've been sort of on the hunt, but finding the right fit, the right kind of person who can step in and do the work. And like over the last year that at least that I've been very directly involved in hiring, it's occurred to me that like you don't just go with like who's the best fit at the time, but like sometimes you wait and find the right fit, and that's been, it's definitely a challenge when you are short drivers and constantly asking people like, oh, like, will you fill in this shift again, like, will you do this, will you work more hours?
How do you determine a right fit?
It's a good question. I mean, a lot of it is just their personality. They are they easygoing? Are they like, are they are they driven? You know, when I'm meeting that with them in an interview, how much of it is me asking questions and they're just like answering them, but like not really elaborating? How much are they like talking over me? If they're too enthusiastic, it's almost a bad thing too,
Yeah.
you know? Like I don't want somebody who's going to come in and be like, "Well, you guys are doing this all wrong," and like blah blah blah. And typically that doesn't happen, but um it's hard.
And then at the end of the day, you think you found the right fit, and a month later, you realize this person's not it at all.
Yeah.
So it's a toss up.
It is. It is a toss up. And you know, I'm still learning every day, like how do I find a right fit? How do I train a driver so that they have all the tools that they need? And like I don't necessarily have the time to go out and do every training. So trusting my colleagues, trusting our fleet manager Jake, trusting other drivers to show a new person the ropes and like to do a good job with it. That's hard for me, is just like letting other people have that responsibility, because like I want to control it all and I can't. It's crazy. I can't do that. That and I think the other thing that's
You did do 200 some pickups one day, breaking a world record for Bootstrap.
112.
Oh,
Yeah.
112.
112.
Okay.
Yeah. Is
That's still a lot, though.
It's still a lot. Yeah. You know, and that actually leads really well into my next point, which is as we continue to grow and to continue to become more and more dense, like what's the balance of what can I ask somebody to reasonably do and what's too much? So if we have 100 customers in a 1 square mile radius or half a square mile, like can I ask one person to do 100 stops, or is that like mentally?
Well, you set the bar, so technically,
and
yes.
physically, well, and that was over like several mile span. So,
I did it. Why can't you?
yeah, but not everybody
I know.
is me. Like I'm
The whole
stubborn.
"I did it, why can't you" doesn't work as a leader.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much right now, because I did it, and I used to go to the farm 4 times a week, and some of our employees can't even go once a week these days.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
the whole, back in my day philosophy, it doesn't work. So I guess the moral of the story is you constantly have to reinvent yourself and reinvent how you're running, or how the ship is sailing in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
and change course.
But with
Yeah.
that, couldn't you encourage someone to reinvent themselves?
People
Right.
have.
yeah.
You still find yourself going out driving? Or do you avoid it at all costs?
Occasionally I have this week where I'm like, Emma, I want to help out, and I'll try and do, if Emma has anything for me, I'll try and do a shift, but I have phased myself out of driving. It's just something that somebody else can do, and I can pay them for it.
I like it.
And
Yeah.
same with Emma. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's tough. I mean, I came from a time when I was the first person to drive a van, and I was one of the only people going to the farm. So like I took on a lot, and it burned me out trying to do management and trying to do driving. And I decided, I was going to focus on management instead of spending all my time out on the road. And I thought that was a good decision, and I think it was. And it also kept me healthier and more sane as an individual, instead of being on the road, checking my emails, when I'm parked, writing emails and getting back on the road. I mean, it was just mental for a while there. And then Emma kind of was in that position too, where she was still driving. But at every step of the way, whether it's Emma, myself, Andy, or whoever it may be that we've promoted, we try to find the right balance between how much money is coming in, how many accounts we have, and how much, how many, shifts we can take you off the road. At this point, Emma doesn't have any shifts, but sometimes she does have to cover. Sometimes Andy, my business partner, still enjoys hitting the road. It's kind of he just loves that still to this day. I don't particularly care for it that much. I just want to see the operation continue to... It's like that South Park episode. with the
Which one? I
biker-
love South
the
Park.
bikers.
Oh, yes.
And
Yep.
I'm pretty sure they call him a dirty word. Of course, it's South Park. But no, point is, yeah, like again, just reinventing yourselves and reinventing ourselves too, not just the company. And Emma's been a big proponent of, I'm gonna take this on, and then she does it, and we're like, damn, you did a good job. Why don't you continue to do that? And we're gonna take some shifts off, your driving, and put some more shifts onto your management or your customer service. So in a lot of ways, people who come to Bootstrap over time can prove themselves, and if they prove themselves, we will always reward them. There's not been an instance that I can think of where somebody worked really hard and didn't prove themselves unless there was some kind of personal conflict involved, and it just wasn't going to work out for the future. Most of the time, people get what they deserve here.
Big attaboy.
To Emma
Yeah.
or me?
To whoever steps up.
Yeah, exactly.
Attaboy.
Or to you.
So what else are you guys doing then? What you're doing filmmaking
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
and music.
Yeah.
You got your recycled hats, right? Yeah. Among other things. Yeah. So what are you doing filmmaking wise?
I started a long time ago before Bootstrap. I was freelance filmmaking, and made a bunch of movies for nonprofits. And now with having a little bit more time cleared up, I'm trying to get back into that world because it's something I'm really passionate about, is telling people's stories. Just as yourself sitting here and interviewing me, I love interviewing other people and hearing about them, and crafting a story through documentary film.
So you do documentaries.
Documentary film, yeah, and it's mostly commissioned work. So I hardly ever do anything that's just for fun, or at least I haven't yet. But that might be down the line at some point. I'm learning about some pretty cool projects that I'm like, you know what, I could do this, and I don't have to necessarily get paid for it. But yeah, so short documentary films, 3 to 5 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever it may be, for maybe an organization that I believe in will hire me, and I give them a pretty generous discount and put them on the map with a little bit of film work. And then music wise, I did finally reach a life goal of mine, and was able to get a band together, and we recorded an album, and that came out in April of this year. And then we had our release show in June, so a little bit less than a few weeks ago.
Congrats.
Thanks. And that was a really big milestone. I've always just wanted to do that.
Was
just
this
for
your only
fun.
band?
Yeah, I don't dabble too much in music. I've written music pretty much my entire life since I picked up a guitar. So I have hundreds and hundreds of songs that I've written. But as a band, this was my first band since high school. As an adult, we came together. We were really serious about it. We put out a pretty good record, I think, in my opinion. But I'm happy to kind of not do all the band stuff a lot, because I have other hobbies too, like gardening, and spending time with my girlfriend and her son, and being the summer, I love being outdoors and riding my bike and hiking and swimming. So like I don't want to I'm kind of like all over the place and all over the map with the interests and hobbies that I have. So I don't want just music to consume me. I don't want just filmmaking to consume me. I am, consumed by Bootstrap in some ways, but in other ways, it's given me a lot of freedoms at this point to pursue some other avenues that I've always wanted to pursue. And actually, I recently bought a new camera, and I'm hoping to make some new films for Bootstrap as well. Put my talents to use.
You done any features? Or have any in mind? Documentaries?
No, I don't have anything in mind. I did a thing about a Cuban permaculture farm that I kind of put out there a few months ago.
You went to Cuba last year. Is that what that was for?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was interesting because I got to work with footage that was in Spanish, so I had to hire a translator and do subtitles, which I'd never done. And I flew to Florida to meet with a Cuban friend of mine to interview him about this permaculture farm that he was very familiar with, and then used a lot of stock footage from them to put it all together. It was a fun little project. I didn't get paid for it, but that was kind of a little like, hey, here's what we should be doing. This is like, and it also had to do with the whole collapse of um, Cuba and the collapse of the Soviet Union and how Cuba was impacted and how they had to move to these alternate food systems because they no longer had Soviet, like fertilizers to grow crops anymore. So it's kind of a fascinating story what happened in Cuba in the 90s where they had no other choice. They basically went through this enormous disaster, essentially, this economic and financial disaster, and had no other choice than to grow their own food in a holistic way. Um, and from that came a lot of really cool permaculture examples. And I think it's a fascinating story and in its own right. And so I was happy to kind of do a quick little 3 to 4 minute video. I don't remember how long it was, but yeah, that was
That's
fun
cool,
to do.
man. That's really cool. What about you, Emma? What do you got going on?
It's a good question. I work a lot. No, I'm kidding. Well, I'm not, but I really like to sew in my free time. So a few months ago, let me back up. For as long as I can remember, I've been like a hat person. I've loved hats since
I
I
think
was
you
a little
described
kid.
yourself to me as a hat enthusiast.
Yes, I am a hat
I like it.
enthusiast for sure. When I was in like elementary school, I had this fleece hat that I would wear every day, and it had it was one of those like Joker hats. Like it had like things that like long things, and it had these two things, and I like ties that I would tie it together and then just like wear it around my neck when I wasn't wearing the hat on my head. It was really bizarre. But I've always loved hats, and so baseball hats, whatever. So I have also loved to sew for a really long time, and a few months ago I was at my mom's house and I saw this fabric that was like it had been curtains in her dining room in like the 80s, and I was like, that's so ugly. I want to wear it. And so that's what I did is I took my favorite 5-panel hat and I like put paper over it and traced it to make a pattern basically. And then I put it on this fabric and cut it out and watched a YouTube video or a couple YouTube videos on like the order of sewing a 5-panel hat. And I had a hat that like somebody had given me and I hated it. I never wore it. So I took it apart and used the plastic brim and the snap enclosure from the back and sewed those into the new hat. And so yeah, I just like do that now, and I'll find curtains or I was at Goodwill one time. This hat that I'm wearing was formerly a pair of pants that I found in Goodwill.
Cool.
And yeah, I don't know, it's really fun.
It's like if I was to describe it, it's like a retro 90s sort of
Oh,
like,
definitely.
I don't even like, yeah.
Like very
all
like
the,
Nickelodeon.
yeah, super
Yeah.
Nickelodeon.
We're going to be snapping a couple pics after this. We'll make sure to point out the hat.
Yeah.
But that's awesome.
Yeah, and what I like about it is like, it's I try not to buy new fabric for these hats. I just kind of find curtains or find a pair of pants or like whatever and turn that into a hat. I found a corduroy skirt in a thrift shop that's owned by my friend Hilken, who's actually married to Andy McBain and who works at Bootstrap with us, and found this corduroy skirt at her thrift store one time and like bought that and turned it into a hat, and that was really fun. I don't know, it's like fun for me. I don't have a lot of intentions of like growing this huge business out of it. If my friends ask me and they have a particular fabric or pattern in mind, I'll make them a hat. But
You could do a lot with it. You made me a notebook.
I
still use it to this day.
do you use it? It hasn't fallen apart yet?
It's about to, and I'm
Yeah.
also running out of pages, so
Yeah.
I might have to put in an order for another one.
All right. Yeah. Notebooks are a little harder
It's
than,
great though.
than hats.
It was more durable than I thought it would be.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
kudos.
I'm glad. I like to sew. I like to get creative. trying to think what else. I used to crochet a lot of weird hats.
Play the drums.
I play the drums a little bit. I'm trying to learn. Was taking lessons for a little while and kind of ran out of time. My instructor and I both like had a lot of time conflicts, and so that stopped. But I enjoy it a lot. I'd like to get back into it. Have a drum kit that I like to play.
I know I donated to it.
You did. You donated some cymbals. I'm very grateful because cymbals are expensive.
They are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's fun. So you have your band with you, and I realized recently that Eddie's in it too.
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
And then I was looking because I saw whether you guys are linked on Bootstrap or whatever, but I was looking for pictures of Emma on the drums. And I was like, do they have a Bootstrap band? Is this a Bootstrap band? That'd be great. So if you need a drummer, I think that's a great choice.
It's funny because like half the Bootstrap staff is in a band.
We were talking about that before. It was kind of crazy. You guys are all on the same wavelength, everyone that works there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something to be said about being connected to music and nature. And I think they kind of go hand in hand, and having like a fun lifestyle and a job that you like to do, and being creative and not burning yourself down and maybe how much money you're making or what
Living
career.
outside the rat race.
Yeah, exactly. That's well put. Well put, Corey.
Bootstrap also offers a lot of flexibility, so I think people who want to play music are also drawn to Bootstrap for that reason. Practical reason.
All right. You guys want to plug the band?
What do you mean plug the band?
Where can someone look up the music?
Oh, okay. I didn't know what band you were referring to.
Your band, man.
Okay. Yeah, it's called Black Squirrel, BLKSQIRRL. So we're basically Black Squirrel without the vowels. You can find it on Bandcamp, blacksquirrel.bandcamp.com. And I also am working on putting together a montage of our clips from our first show that'll be on our YouTube channel.
The record show.
Yeah, the release show.
Yeah.
So we got some good footage.
It was a great show. Had a lot of fun.
Thanks.
Where was it?
The Midway Cafe in Jamaica Plain.
Never been there.
It's a good
Really?
spot.
It's a good venue. Yeah. That was also really was a Bootstrap show. Everyone who played that night was
Part of the Bootstrap crew.
Andy McBain, who is actually, I want to plug him. He's opening for the Foo Fighters. His
What?
band, the
Yeah.
Monsters, is opening for the Foo Fighters. He helped arrange the gig for me. He also helped arrange the producer for my album. So he was very influential in this whole creation. And then he played as a solo act, Andy California. Then we came on, and then Sundog, which is Jonathan Nankov, came on and played as a solo act to close out the show. And then Eddie Culkins, our warehouse manager, is the bassist for my band. And then Zach Page lives in Portland, and he's a brewer out there. He's the drummer for the band.
So wait, he's opening for the Foo Fighters? How did that happen?
From what I understand, they know Dinosaur Jr., the band that's opening the following night at Fenway for the Foo Fighters. And I guess one way or another, they got the call to open up for the Foo Fighters. And I think it was through this connection through Dinosaur Jr.
Monsieurs?
Monsieurs, yeah.
I'm going to have to look this up.
Yeah, I know Speedy Ortiz is also playing one night
Okay.
with them.
When is that? Do you know when the show is?
August, maybe?
At Fenway?
July? August? Yeah, at Fenway.
Is this all the Foo Fighters? And
Yeah, Foo Fighters are playing 2 nights, and
Okay.
I think one night it might be Dinosaur Jr. and the Monsieurs, and the other night is Speedy. I don't remember exactly. I might be wrong, but
okay.
You guys going to go support?
tickets are very expensive.
I
Yeah.
bet.
But yeah, no.
Maybe if we got to get
In spirit.
Yeah.
In spirit. Yeah, VIP.
We have seen him. At least I've seen him many times.
What's he
and
play?
He is a very colorful and eclectic lead singer in the band The Monsieurs. as Andy California, he's a blues guitarist and singer. In the Monsters, he's sort of like a Freddie Mercury type of persona
Interesting.
with a little bit of Ozzy Osbourne, and they play a sort of retro kind of 80s punk rock, I would say.
It's funny because you see him around Bootstrap and he's so quiet and chill. Like
Yeah.
he gets way into it on stage.
Gets way into it on stage. Yeah.
That's fun.
It's great.
I like it.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap this up. We're approaching 2 hours
All right.
already. So thank you so much for coming on. One more time, what were your socials? Bootstraps?
Bootstrap Compost at gmail.com.
That's social
Caught me
media.
off guard. You caught me off guard.
Instagram. All right, I got it right here.
We're available in the greater Boston area as well as Providence. You can find us online at bootstrapcompost.com, Facebook, Bootstrap Compost on Facebook, Instagram Bootstrap Compost, and then our Twitter handle is actually at Compost Boston because Bootstrap Compost is too many letters for a Twitter username. So at Compost Boston on Twitter. And you can find a lot of really good resources for gardening, for composting, home composting, science, environment, through all those social media channels. We don't just go out there blasting about how cool we are. Even if we are, I don't know if we are cool or not, but we actually do provide, tangible resources and blog posts and educational material that's beneficial for anybody who's interested in gardening, composting, or...
Awesome. Thanks, Igor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Corey.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I want to thank you for listening to the podcast and encourage you to give us some feedback as we get into the swing of things. In addition, if you know any interesting people, have any interesting stories or perspectives, or have any ideas for topics to bring to the show, please use our Contact Us page on the website and fill out the form. We have a few more interesting guests lined up, and I'm really looking forward to it, and we will be updating this through our socials and our website. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe for more bi-weekly content. You can also find this information and more on our website, which is www.theadventurouspodcast.com. Our Instagram is @theadventurouspodcast. Pretty easy to remember. We will also soon be live streaming from our YouTube page. I want to give one final quick thank you to our guests, Igor and Emma of Bootstrap Compost. Encourage you guys to keep up the good work that you're doing. And don't forget that you can find them at Compost Boston on Twitter, at Bootstrap Compost on Instagram, and Bootstrap Compost is able to be searched on Facebook. See you in 2 weeks.